Alright, this is Ben Hellistead, your Jedi warrior for Jesus. Welcome to Operation End Times. The Venus Conspiracy 2012 Unraveled. This is part 2. We're going to dive deeper into the conspiracy. So you got to hold on to your hats. All you fellow watchers and Jedi warriors out there, I want to thank you if you've already watched part 1. We're trying to pick up part 2 right where we left off. I kind of mentioned April 3rd. It's when Venus is going to be lined up with the Palais DS. And what I want to just throw out here real quick. I'm trying to be relevant. I'm not trying to connect dots that ain't connected, so I'll let you know when I'm connecting some dots that the line is pretty thin or whatever. But I planted a stake. Anybody that's been watching my Operation End Time knows I said back in September 30th of 2011 that was a sign that the tribulation had started. And I started my tribulation blog on 5/15/2011, which the 1-year anniversary is a big date. It's the day that Venus goes into retrograde and just starts this amazing journey. But when I analyze this stuff, looking at information, I always try and look forward too. That's why it's Operation End Times. So this April 3rd alignment of Venus and the Palais DS, just my inner tuition said Revelations 5, man. That's the story where it's in heaven, the throne of God. And you know what? The Palais DS, there's some stars in there. Like the big star is Alcyon, which is known as the throne of God. And, a lot of people actually believe that that's where heaven is located, in the Palais DS. It's also known as the Seven Sisters. I think it was the Jehovah's Witnesses, man, all the way up until, I think, the late 1800s were saying God lives on the star Alcyon. I don't think they really say that so much anymore. But Venus will be in the Palais DS, and, Revelations 5 talks about the Lamb is worthy to approach the throne and gets to open the scrolls. And, Revelations, I was talking to a buddy the other day, and he was saying, Revelations is linear. And I was like, I don't know about that, because Revelations, all the chapters talk about all sorts of stuff, and it could be talking about past, present, or future, So, is Revelations 5 the past, present, or the future? Maybe it's all three. It's just something that has to happen in time, in infinite time. But see, what you'll find out is when we go into the Venus Conspiracy, we're not talking about infinite time. We're talking about the end times. If time is ending, that means there was a beginning of time, an alpha and an omega. And that's where Venus and the Palais DS come in, because in the big scheme of things, that's how we measure time. That's how the ancients measured time. In the Bible, it says God created day and night, separate by the moon and the sun, and that's an awareness for us humans, here on the third dimension, which is day and night. It's a time cycle based on light and darkness. But what we find is, we get this picture of time where it's a circle, it goes round. It's like a cycle, and the cycle, when you start analyzing it, it's like a big time machine. It's divine order. It's precision, and it's like a clock, and like the great cycle is this 26,000 year cycle progression through the constellations known as the zodiac. But ancient man, every culture around the earth used the Palais DS. The circle itself, the 26,000 year cycle, is known as the Great Palais DS Year. So if the circle is a time machine, a clock, day and night, sun and the moon are like the hands on the clock, but the Pleiades is like the set button, on off. Maybe the snooze button. But Venus, that's the alarm button, baby. You know, time to get up, time to wake up. Venus. You know, what are we waking up for? Oh, the ending of an age, the starting of an age. And, you know, if you understand things, it's a transfer of power. And that's the good news, man. You know, outside of the doom and gloom and the catastrophic change, there's plenty of good news, man, because Venus represents the future based on love. Love rules. A brighter day. An age of enlightenment. Jesus. But you know, I'm going to throw out there, I don't know everything. You know, I'm just a man. I got nobody talking to me, no magic voices. So everything I talk about is subject to interpretation and discussion. You know, you can send me your inputs on this stuff. I'm looking for additional insight too. But I do believe 2012, man, we're in an amazing year to be living in, because we have something unfolding in the skies right above our heads, and Venus is right in the middle of it. So are the Pleiades. But there's all these other constellations that are happening, that where all these alignments and where the stars and planets are, that mean stuff this year. And it's also affecting us. You know, the sun cycle, the extreme weather, the earthquakes, the volcanoes. It's all tied together. But you know, when we're looking at these signs, when we're looking at what's going on, you got to keep in mind a couple things. It's the yin and yang. You know, like things could be good or bad. You know, night or day. You know, Venus could be good or bad. There's also that's what I call the mirror effect. There's also what I call reflections. You know, where the past is the present is the future. You know, like the past represents the future. You know, like you learn from the past, but things repeat themselves. You know, in that circle. But another concept is, as we look at these things, it's like, imagine looking through a telescope or a peephole in a door. So there's two ways to look at things. You can look through the peephole one way, or you can look through the peephole the other way. So that's the other thing, is as you look at, and you know, here's the common thread. All of us humans sitting here in 2012, we're sitting here and we're asking two big questions about the end times. We're saying, what the hell's happening? And then the other big question we're all asking is, when the hell is it happening? And you know, that's part of what the Venus Conspiracy is going to answer, is what's happening and when the hell is it happening. But think about it. Everybody's saying it's the end times. What the hell's happening? Well, you just answered your own question. End times. Time is ending. And, you know, that's amazing. But even in Revelations, right at the end, you know, as the final judgment's coming, there's an angel that comes down and says, this is the end of time. And, you know, the Hopi in the Aztec prophecies, that's how they view it, is once there's certain alignments of the Pleiades and Venus and whatnot, it's the end of time. You know, what I'm going to tell you is, once again, it's a circle. So the end of time means there might be a beginning of time. So what they're really saying, it's the end of measuring or being able to see time the way we've been looking at it for 26,000 years. And maybe because the heavens are going to be moved, which in part 1, I read you that verse in Matthew 24, where Jesus talks about the stars and the sun and the moon all being moved after the tribulation. You know, a new sun, a new time, new way of measuring it. You know, maybe it's not 26,000 years anymore. Maybe the new way of looking at stuff is it's 1,000,000 years. You know, hard to say. But that's another part of the conspiracy, the Venus Conspiracy, is the veil being lifted, the understanding the delusion, the deception. And part of it is time. You know, I was explaining to a friend, you know, if you accept the fact that God exists, and for a moment, let's just do that. Let's say there is a God. So if we then say God created man, like the first man, Adam, it doesn't tell us, hey, God created one cell and over millions of years it evolved into a man. No, he created a man that was a mature man, Adam. So if you were a scientist that was alive, let's just say 5 minutes after God made Adam, you could use every single instrument available to you scientifically. Everything we got today, carbon dating and, breath analyzer, whatever. But all your scientific observation would tell you, hey man, this guy has existed on the planet probably 20 to 30 years. But guess what? That would be a lie, because God created this guy and he's only been alive for 1 day or for 5 minutes or whatever it is. That's the truth. So, to me, that could be part of the deception. The Venus conspiracy in and of itself is our whole lives were brought up to view time in a certain way, and modern science would have us believe that the universe and the planets have been around for millions and billions of years. To all our scientific observation and instruments, that may be the truth, but that may be also the lie, the deception. That the real truth is that if there is a God, the grand designer, the clock builder, the divine order of the heavens, that maybe we haven't been around for billions of years. That's just the way it looks. But this 26,000 year cycle, maybe that's how long we've been around. Hard to say. But I think I've linked in some videos both to the Tribulation blog and to this blog. There was one, Eyes in the Alien Sky, where a guy talks about how ancient man might have viewed the planets and the sun, and it's amazing. I think there's some truth to it. And that might be the truth as far as what we're about to experience in this year and in the next couple of years. Because when people use the term end of the world, I don't know if the world's ending this year, but we could be in the end times, heading towards new times. But you know what? The end of the world, everybody's world could end any moment. You could slip on a banana peel and it'd be the end of your world, But what we're talking about is just the grander scheme of things, So Venus, is the alarm clock, and it's sounding the alarm. It's saying, wake up. And I do believe that's what's unfolding, in 2012, is Venus is putting on the show. And if you're not aware of it, if you're not watching it, then you're missing everything. And it may because there's a saying, as above, so below, So what we're seeing with Venus could be telling us what happened in the past, what's happening now, or what's going to happen, in a month or in a year. But it's like, pay attention to what's being said. So 4/3, Venus is in the Pleiades. Another big date is May 20th. There's going to be a solar eclipse with the moon and the Pleiades all lined up. And this is the day that fits the description for the fulfillment of the Aztec and Hopi prophecies, where the Pleiades will be at the dome of the heavens. And that's when they said disaster came. And that doesn't mean it came that exact minute, but that means you're in the window of it approaching and happening. Venus goes retrograde on the 15th, as I mentioned. And, on 6/6, it transits the sun. Other big dates, 12/3 of December, 12/12, 12/21. These are all times when either the Pleiades is lining up with the Great Pyramid or with the pyramids down in Mexico. And the 3rd of December supposedly is when Saturn, Mercury, and Venus align perfectly according to the pyramids of Giza. And, that's where it ties in some of these other conspiracies like the Freemasons and the Illuminati, because a lot of their hidden knowledge that they seem to have is based on these star alignments and possible portal, gateway to the heavens, Jacob's ladder, gods coming to earth, us going up to the gods, is that going to be happening? That's part of the what the heck's happening. What is happening? The one thing we do know that's happening is because we're calling it the end times. Time is ending. And all these prophecies, that's kind of what you see in them. Even the Bible, everybody's talking about new time. Or new way of measuring time. And that's why, to me, you know, looking at Venus is important, because when we say what's happening or when's it happening, what we're seeing with Venus is going to tell us if we pay attention. And once again, there's two ways of looking at stuff, you know, through one end of the peephole or through the other end of the peephole. And, you know, when we stand on Earth, that's one view, you know, as we see the planets and stars aligning in the constellations. And there's an amazing story as Venus, in its retrograde, is going to go across Orion. And it's going to stay there stationary for a day or two right above Orion. And then it goes back across, and it's going to stop at Aldebaran in the constellation of Taurus, which is the Eye of God. But there's a reverse way of looking through the peephole, which is known as the view from the sun looking out at the constellations. It's called a synod. You know, that's an amazing word, because, you know, church synods, you know, worshiping the sun. Suns have, all the churches have symbols of the sun all over the place. But if you look out from the sun, you kind of get the reverse image. But Venus and the Earth are going across the galactic center of the universe on 6/6 as well. And they're going to go through the gates of God. And they're stopping at places like the asteroid Juno, which is known as the Covenant, the comet of the Covenant. But you know what? I'll put links into this video, which will take you to the websites that have all the official information on this stuff, so you can check it out for yourselves. But what I'm going to tell you is there's a story. There's a yin and a yang. From one view, it might be a positive story. From the other view, it might be a negative story. Kind of like the Pleiades. To some people, the Pleiades is positive. To other people, it's doom and destruction. And, you know, I'll go into that in part 3, because you'll see that relates exactly to the sinister forces that are aligning on the planet as we speak, because it is a battle of good versus evil, you know. But Venus is the integral part, telling the story in the heavens, as above, so below, you know. And I think, you know, I've been saying we're in the final 7 years, so there's a lot of stuff that's got to happen in the next year or so that we're going to be looking at. And once again, you can go to Revelations, like the 4 horsemen, that could be planets, you know. The white horseman could be Venus, the red horseman could be Mars. People say the black horseman would be Saturn. I'm thinking it could be Nibiru, a dark star. But then the final horse, the pale horse, well, hey, that's the Pleiades, man. You know, they're known as the pale star cluster, you know, the pale rider. You know, that's how the Cherokee Indians viewed the Pleiades, as the pale rider. Is that just a coincidence? I don't think so. All right, stay tuned. I'll be bringing you, you know, the Venus Conspiracy Part 3. This stuff is still unraveling, man. You know, it's got miles to go, and time is running out. The show is on. All right, God bless everybody. Get your tribulation on. Think positive. And if you've got any questions, just send them my way. All right, peace out.